From Chicago studios, this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Samana Siddiqui. First, the headlines. Climate movement hails $40 trillion in fossil fuel divestment pledges. Tanzania races to develop natural gas reserves. UN criticizes Israel declaring Palestinian human rights organizations terrorists. Hindu extremists protest Muslim business in Modi's home state. Gunmen kill 16 worshippers in Nigeria mosque attack. And massive cyber attack disrupts gas stations in Iran. Our top story tonight. Nearly 1,500 investors and institutions controlling almost $40 trillion in assets have committed to divesting from fossil fuels over the past decade. According to a new report published on Tuesday, this is the equivalent of the world's two biggest economies, the United States and China, combining to divest from fossil fuels. The report was compiled by the Institute for Energy Economics and Financial Analysis, Stand Earth, C40, and the Wallace Global Fund. It was issued 4 days before the start of the United Nations Climate Conference in Glasgow. Climate campaigners applauded the achievement while warning that further commitments and action are crucial. In 10 years, the movement has grown to become a major global influence on energy policy. The report notes that today, there are over 1,400 institutions publicly committed to at least some form of fossil fuel divestment. That represents over $39 trillion of assets under management. Tanzania is accelerating efforts to become a natural gas exporter. It aims to join the prestigious Liquefied Natural Gas Exporters Club. President Samia Suluhu Hassan has restarted negotiations with oil companies after they stalled in 2019. She would like development to start in 2023. The East African country seeks to unlock up to $30 billion in foreign investments. It also hopes to escape an energy transition and rush to decarbonize, which could make its enormous gas reserves useless. Tanzania has an estimated 57 trillion cubic feet of gas reserves. Production sharing disputes with oil corporations have kept that wealth untapped. Two Libyan rivals have hired the same Israeli consulting firm to run their presidential election campaigns in the war-torn country. The Hebrew-language Israel Hayom newspaper says Khalifa Haftar and Saif al-Islam Gaddafi, son of former Libyan ruler Muammar Gaddafi, contracted with the firm registered in the United Arab Emirates. The newspaper cited senior Gulf officials who said Haftar's son signed the contract with the firm. It reports that the contracts are worth tens of millions of dollars. Libya's presidential and parliamentary elections are set to take place on December 24th. The United Nations Human Rights Chief has criticized Israel's designation of 6 Palestinian groups as terrorist organizations. UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Michelle Bachelet called it an attack on human rights defenders, freedom of association, and the right to public participation. She said on Tuesday the designation should immediately be revoked. Bachelet said these organizations are some of the most reputable human rights and humanitarian groups in the occupied Palestinian territory. The groups have worked closely with the UN for decades. 13 political parties and groups from the Arab world issued a joint statement Sunday condemning Israel's decision. As well, 21 Israel-based civil society groups censured the Israeli government's labeling of the groups, which they called an act of cowardice. The designation will likely pave the way for Israel to raid these groups' offices, seize assets, arrest staff, and criminalize any public expressions of support for them. In related news, Israel is cutting down olive trees which carry huge significance to Palestinians. Here is a report by Asad Khan and Saleha Farouk.
The world is urging people to plant trees. Israel, however, is cutting trees down. The Joint Advocacy Initiative says that the Israeli military and Jewish settlers have destroyed more than 548,000 olive trees owned by Palestinian farmers. The trees have been destroyed in order to build walls, settlements, and roads for the illegal settlers. Palestinians cannot walk on these roads. The destruction is ongoing. 45 cases have been reported where settlers damaged the property of farmers, including chopping down olive trees, destroying farms and fences. In 36 cases, they even attacked farmers or shepherds. Olive trees carry more than economic significance in the lives of Palestinians. They are not like any other. Palestine is considered the native home of the olive tree. Traces of the olive tree in Palestine date back hundreds of thousands of years. Olive trees are symbolic of the Palestinian desire for peace and their love for their land. Olive trees are drought resistant and can grow under poor soil conditions. They represent Palestinian resistance and resilience.
A video of a Hindu extremist mob protesting the opening of a restaurant owned by a Muslim is causing a stir in India. The video, which went viral, is reportedly from Anand, Gujarat. It was posted by MuslimMirror.com on Twitter. In it, the mob can be heard shouting the slogan, "If you want to stay in India, you will have to say Hail Lord Ram." The crowd also chanted, "Long live India, beat the traitors with shoes." In another incident, a Muslim-owned chicken shop was vandalized by a right-wing Hindu group near Belagavi, Karnataka. The city has witnessed a series of hate crimes in the past few weeks. Muslim-owned shops and businesses have been targeted by Hindu extremists. Burma's junta boycotted Southeast Asia's largest summit Tuesday after its leader Min Aung Hlaing was banned from the event. The move has deepened the regime's isolation 9 months after it took power in a coup. The International Court of Justice has determined that the Burmese military committed genocide as it ousted the previous government on February 1st. A virtual gathering kicked off 3 days of meetings hosted by the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN. The junta's refusal to let a special envoy meet deposed civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi prompted the 10-member bloc to bar Hlaing from the week's summit. U.S. President Joe Biden and Chinese and Russian leaders are among the attendees. Gunmen killed 16 worshippers while they were praying at a mosque in central Nigeria on Monday morning. Government Secretary Ahmed Ibrahim Matane told AFP scores of gunmen on motorcycles stormed Mazakuka village in Mashegu district and opened fire during morning prayers. 3 worshippers were injured in the attack, one of them critically. Gangs of cattle thieves and kidnappers for ransom, known locally as bandits, have been terrorizing communities in northwest and central Nigeria. They continue to raid villages, killing residents and burning homes after looting them. More than 2 million people have been displaced in northeast Nigeria, according to a European Union official in the country. The United Nations Refugee Agency will soon begin aid operations in support of Rohingyas on a remote Bangladeshi island. The Bangladesh government has relocated more than 20,000 Rohingya refugees to the Bay of Bengal island of Bhoshan Char. Over the past year, the refugees have complained of poor food and living conditions there. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, or UNHCR, and the Bangladesh government have agreed to work together to support refugees. While some Rohingya welcome the UN agency's role, others say the island will remain unlivable even after it begins operations there. Human rights groups and many Rohingya compare the facility to a prison. They urge the UNHCR and the Bangladeshi government to release details of the deal to monitor compliance. Authorities in Iran said on Tuesday that a massive cyber attack is causing widespread disruption at gas stations across the country, affecting fuel distribution facilities. No group has claimed responsibility for the attack, which sent shockwaves nationwide amid fears of a fuel crisis. Iran's oil ministry officials told state media that they are holding emergency meetings to fix the problem. Gas stations across the country, including in the capital Tehran, have been forced to close. The attack targeted software that supports a smart card payment for subsidized fuel. Its timing coincides with the anniversary of the November 2019 violent protests over fuel price hikes, which claimed many lives. A 38-year-old man faces first-degree arson charges in connection with a fire at a Tacoma, Washington mosque earlier this month. On October 12th, West Pierce Fire and Rescue responded to a fire at the Islamic Center of Tacoma. Crews quickly put out the flames, but there was fire, smoke, and water damage to the interior and exterior of the mosque. No one was injured. Coming up next after the break is our in-depth analysis segment, so stay tuned, and we'll be right back after these messages.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize, and accuse. Walk a mile in my shoes.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
Despite the development of a COVID-19 vaccine, millions around the world will not have access. We need a vaccine that's free and available to everyone, everywhere. It's time for a people's vaccine.
Our fellow Americans.
Right now, the COVID-19 vaccines are available to millions of Americans.
And soon, they will be available to everyone.
The science is clear. These vaccines will protect you and those you love from this dangerous and deadly disease.
They could save your life.
So we urge you to get vaccinated when it's available to you.
That's the first step to ending the pandemic and moving our country forward. It's up to you.
I am what hunger looks like in America. I am an 8-year-old girl who's not excited for the last day of school. Because this may be the last time I'll have lunch. Till September. I am a single father of 2 who works 3 part-time jobs, and that's still not enough to put food on the table. I was created by artificial intelligence from faces of the 1 in 8 Americans who struggle with hunger.
Feeding America, 200 food banks strong.
Dad, they took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. Dad! You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
Welcome back. For our in-depth analysis segment, let's go to Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid. Over to you, Imam Mujahid.
Thank you, Samana. There is an interesting conversation which has been around in the Muslim community about Columbus. Not Columbus, Ohio, but the guy whose name is with Columbus, Ohio. And a professor is providing a historical context to that conversation. And with us today is Alan Mikhail. Welcome to Muslim Network TV.
Thank you very much.
Professor Mikhail is American historian and is a professor of history at the Yale University. You say that his primary motive and primary force behind Columbus' Atlantic crossing essentially was fear and hatred of Islam. What was the fear and what was the hatred?
So I argue in some of the recent work that I've done that to understand 1492, we have to understand the world that made Columbus. And that world was one in which Islam was seen as one of the foremost enemies of Christendom. So it's not so much that this is the only motivating factor for Columbus's Atlantic voyages, but it's one that's been missing from the story and one that I tried to provide. And the evidence that I have for that are many. So one is if we take the place where Columbus was born and the time in which he was born, Genoa, the Italian city of Genoa in 1451. We come to see that that port was very important as both a mercantile port and a port in which crusaders going to the Holy Land to attempt to liberate Jerusalem from Muslim hands, where they would often dock their ships and leave for various ventures to the east. 2 years after Columbus's birth is, of course, 1453. When the Ottomans take Constantinople, which for a young boy growing up in a city that had connections to the East was very important for shaping his worldview. So it was probably the case that Columbus knew some families that had connections to crusaders, either going directly themselves on crusade or members of their family. No doubt he knew merchants who had connections to ports in the eastern Black Sea and in the eastern Mediterranean that were becoming more and more difficult for Italian merchants to control, as they had previously, because of the encroachment of the Ottomans west, which is sort of embodied and symbolized and reaches its peak in 1453. So when I talk about Columbus as having a crusading ethos or growing up in a crusading ethos, this is some of what I'm talking about in his very early life.
But you're saying it's not at heart. He actually himself participated in war. That's right.
So Columbus, after his boyhood in Genoa, takes to the sea as an apprentice sailor. Some of his earliest voyages don't have much to do with war, but more with commerce, and take him to North Africa and then to the Aegean, very close to the coast with the Ottomans. But it's really when he enters Iberia a bit after this period where he really begins to fall in with first a group of Portuguese sailors associated with Henry the Navigator, and then later with the armies of Isabella and Ferdinand, that he comes to participate in things that are sometimes commerce and sometimes war along the coast of West Africa with the Portuguese, and then fighting against Muslims in southern Spain.
Has he written anything, any diaries or anything? How do we know that these motivations were claimed by him as well?
Right. So we know some of what Columbus read as a child, including the work of Marco Polo, which was very formative for him for understanding the supposed existence of the Grand Khan of the East, which is one of the things that Columbus writes about in his own writing quite a bit. We have a biography written by his son quite after the fact, which supposedly is comes from conversations with Columbus himself. And then most importantly, we have Columbus's diaries of the 4 voyages, and then a text that he was writing towards the end of his life, which is a kind of apocalyptical text which he never completed, which is partly about the kind of retaking of Jerusalem and the impending destruction of Islam. So, I first became interested in this work precisely through Columbus's diaries of his voyages, the 4 voyages, and these references that he makes, quite fleeting often, to Muslim things. So, for instance, he describes the dress of a group of indigenous women in the Caribbean as being akin to what he calls Moorish sashes. He describes the weapons of a group of indigenous men as being akin to the weapons of Muslim soldiers in Spain. If you look at other texts from this period, Cortez, for example, in the conquest of Mexico, again, uses this language of Islam to understand something about Mexico. He describes Aztec temples as mosques, mezquitas in Spanish. He calls Montezuma a sultan. So it's from this textual evidence that we begin to clue into something about how the old world encounter with Islam shaped the conquest of the Americas by the Spanish at the turn of the 16th century.
Now, there is a conversation in the Muslim community, which probably has come through African American literature, which says that there is an evidence of Muslims from Mali. Mali at that time in the 14th century, before and little after, being a very large empire, a rich empire encompassing almost all the West Africa, that there is a King Abu Bakr who sailed to this area, gave his kingship or mansaship to his son or his brother, and sailed over here with thousands of ships and fresh water and things like that. So that literature, and there are a few books published in Africa, and I read a report in BBC about that claim that that shows that African Muslims were present in Caribbean or in Brazil, and their name of location, they say these are African names. So did you find any evidence that Columbus encountered some people actually not naming people Sultan and mosque, a temple becoming a mosque, which I see he's seeing from the glasses of the people which he encountered around him, and he thought those people are present here. I understand that hypothesis, but is there any reality in his book that he had some Arabs, farmer Muslims or secret Muslims or Jews who could speak the language, which help him communicate with people in Caribbean?
So I didn't, I wasn't necessarily interested in and didn't find, therefore, evidence of earlier crossings from Africa to the Americas. There's some evidence to suggest that perhaps before 1492, actually there was movement in the other direction of native peoples crossing at least part of the Atlantic, but that wasn't necessarily something that I spent a lot of time focusing on in my book. But the question of did Columbus take with him Muslims or Jews is one that has been batted around for quite a while. I don't think there's very good evidence on that. There's some suggestion that perhaps there were conversos and moriscos, so that is Jews who converted either ostensibly or actually to Christianity, and Muslims who also ostensibly or actually converted to Christianity, that were on one of the four voyages. I haven't seen solid evidence of that, and I've only gotten that from other people's accounts, so I can't provide any solid proof that that's true.
Now, you mentioned that Columbus' experience actually defines how the early colonial or the racist attitude toward the native people, but how Columbus would be able to communicate his worldview to the people arriving as a colonist in Americas. He didn't write about it, he didn't deliver any sermons about it, or the way he acquired anti-Muslim perspective is the way those people coming from Europe acquired as well.
That's right. I mean, communication between Europeans and Americans, took quite a while before languages were able to be understood by either party. So the things that I'm talking about are things that really come from the old world and not the new world, are being imposed as part of the Spanish colonial mission in the Caribbean by Europeans and are not coming from the Americas themselves.
I see. Share with us, why this particular perspective which you have shared in your article in LA Times has not been part of the discourse in America about Columbus conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are many reasons for that. One is that part of the initial project of the Americas for the Spanish was to divide themselves from the old world, right? To create a space in which Christianity can flourish, where the people who are presently living there might be convinced or forced to convert, a space free of the major scourge, as Christendom saw it, of the old world, which was Islam. And you see this rhetoric being used very early on in Spanish accounts of the New World. A desire, for example, once the transatlantic slave trade begins, which it does a few decades after 1492, a desire to keep out West African Muslims from the Americas. You have accounts from the 15 teens that some West Africans are supposedly, quote, infecting native peoples with what they call the bad custom of Islam. So there is a desire to keep Islam out of the Americas from the very beginning, and that, I think, has translated over the centuries into an ethos that accepts that view, that accepts that Spain actually was able to sever this old world connection with Islam in the Americas, where in fact the opposite is the case. And that's what I try to show in some of my work, is that in the worldview that Columbus brings and some of the things that we discussed already, in the person of many enslaved Africans in the Americas from very early on. And then moving forward, we can cite different examples from different periods of the way that Islam was involved in the Americas. And there are many different examples that are very, very different. So it's not a straight line from Columbus until today. So I think it's difficult for students of American history, in the broadest possible understanding of what American history is, to think that the Atlantic voyages and then that history moving forward has something to do with Muslims and with Islam. And so we are the inheritors of that legacy.
Well, thank you so much, Professor Mikhail from the Yale University.
Thank you.
Back to you, Samana.
Thank you, Imam Mujahid. That's all from our Chicago studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can find previous episodes and more on our YouTube or Facebook. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Salam and good night.